Here.
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 First item of business is the approval of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes from June 12th, 2019. Are there any corrections or a motion to approve?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So that motion carries. At this time, I would open the floor to any public comments from anybody who wants to comment or address the commission on anything that's not on our agenda tonight. This would be for something outside the agenda. If there's anyone, seeing none, we'll move on then to old business. And we have one item of old business tonight, and that is the Cherrywood Acres Minor Subdivision Plat. And David, you are going to introduce that, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Holtz. Yeah, last meeting on June 12th, we had an introduction of this minor plat located in the Cherrywood Acres addition. The property is located at the southwest corner of High Street and Union Road in a R1 zoning district. Just kind of want to summarize some of those plat details that we went over last time. The property is in an R1 zoning district as well as the rest of the subdivision. Those standards in the R1 district is, for the lot area is 9,000 square feet. And as you can see on parcel F and G, they're just under 13,000 square feet and over 10,000 square feet for the lot area. Setback requirements for the corner lots, we have a 30-foot front, which is along the north side along High Street, and 30-foot in the rear. And then the side yard on the west side is 10% of the lot width, which is 9.2 feet. And then there's a 50-foot setback along Union Road along the east side. So both parcels F and G satisfy those setback requirements. The existing dwelling has met those requirements as well as they changed the characteristics on that lot. Looking at the utility needs, as any type of development that starts in the city, we look at where the existing utilities are and how do they get to the proposed site. So just going through, we have a water line there along the west side of Cherrywood Drive. And as part of this development, the petitioner needs to extend that water main from that line across the north side of the parcel F and parcel G within that utility easement and place a hydrant there. So this water main will basically get the water service within that district or the service area for that. The existing hydrants and main really don't cover all of that entire lot. So we want to make sure we get the water line, the water main to that north side of parcel G, which is basically just the east of the existing driveway on High Street. And then the water connections, actual service lines from the main will go into the houses there. Moving along to electricity, there's an existing line that runs from the southeast corner of the lot up to the existing house. So that line will have to be relocated and placed within the 10-foot utilities and along the south side and then up to the house. And then of course the proposed house would have to tap into that existing line as well. Gas runs along the east side of Cherrywood and the south side High Street. So those service lines will connect into the new house for gas. And then sanitary sewer, it runs down the middle of Cherrywood and High Street. And again, that service line will be connected to the new house. Moving along with grading, there was some questions from last meeting just to kind of explain the grading and the slope of the lot as it exists now. So really the property drains from the southwest corner up to the northeast corner at the intersection of High and Union Road. You can kind of see those elevation starts at 972 and it falls to a northeasterly direction to 967, which is roughly 5 feet. So that is the flow, the surface flow through those lots. The existing ditch along Cherrywood Drive heads north and then it turns east down High Street. And then the proposed lot will just kind of run around the building and then up to the corner and then down to Union Road as well. So those existing topography issues must be maintained for this new development. And then the development cannot create any adverse effect upon surrounding property owners. And that's not just for this, but it's of course of any development that happens in town. So when we look at, there's another question about future lot splits in this area. Staff did a kind of a review of the existing layout of the Cherrywood acres. Using GIS, kind of zoom in on some properties, looking at the location of the buildings. And what we have to first evaluate is the existing structures, where they're sitting at, and where they, with the setbacks, how they sit on the lot. And then if there's any future lot splits in this area. So we want to make sure that, of course, existing structures meet the current setbacks, but if you change that lot, they would have to meet different setbacks if the lot is a front yard or side yard. So we looked at those areas, maintain those minimum standards of the R1, which is a lot depth of at least 100 feet, lot width of 75 feet, and the area is 9,000 again. Driveways, since Union Road is an arterial roadway, any new lots created on that would not allow driveways onto Union Road, since again, that's arterial roadway. And even looking at those lots along Union Road, they're not deep enough, so you couldn't take the existing house and create a rear yard setback and then a new lot behind there, because there's just not enough space left over to have a buildable area. I think I calculated of a 8-foot deep house, you know, with a 50-foot setback and then a 30-foot setback. And they wouldn't meet the lot depth standards of 100 feet. So that would kind of rule out those areas. And we also look at public improvements and where those extensions are. Really kind of key into those corner lots through this area. There's some corner lots up on the north side of the Plat, which doesn't have a street, but there's right-of-way there. There's a potential for a split up there, but then that property owner would have to build a street and extend all utilities up to those lots. So it really limits the potential here for utilizing additional lots out here, looking at existing houses. Realistically, someone wouldn't tear down a house and build 2 new houses. It's just kind of cost prohibitive in that area. But we kind of came up with this lot and a potential other lot there at the north end of Cherrywood for a potential split like this one. So moving along with some summaries of our existing codes, state codes. The state code 354.8 kind of regulates the subdivision code and subdivision platting of lots. And within that code, there's some guidelines there we want to take a look at that, and that's something that we do all the time when we look at subdivisions, is it consistent with the comprehensive plan? Is there a balance of interest between the platter and the person that owns a lot, who plats it, and then those future property owners, and then the public interest? And that really kind of falls into, what does a comprehensive plan say? Is it eligible for type of development? In this case, it's a low-density residential, which is what this is. Other interests could be environmental features like wetlands or floodplains or steep slopes. And then, kind of really ties into the interest of the property owner, how they want to lay that out, and that's kind of called out in those deed restrictions. So those are kind of cases that the state code covers. And then, is there a burden on the public improvements? So is there an increased amount of traffic on streets as the subdivision comes in, or like a sanitary sewer, is that overwhelmed with new development? So those are factors that we take into account when we look at these type of cases. In our subdivision code, it basically mirrors, there's a section in the code that basically mirrors that state code with comprehensive plan, balance of interest, and burden of public improvements, and as well as the character of the development. So with the character of development, kind of outlined here within the deed of dedication, the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council can enact some deed restrictions, so to speak, with that, which may include setbacks, building size, uses, or building height. Excuse me, I hit the button. Building height or uses, but it cannot include plat details such as lot size, lot line, locations, lot area. Those are guiding within the subdivision code and the R1 standards, or whatever zoning district standards are.
along with that, there was, you want to give the example, I think that was brought up last time, about certain areas that have special zoning, like mixed-use zoning, or if there's a special plan that goes with it, like the RP zoning has a master plan that goes with it. That's, you know, some of those cases where there might be a question about the character. And those cases, those things are established when we do the zoning, that there's certain conditions that we've placed on it, that they have to meet the master plan. So I think it was brought up at the last meeting. I think Pinnacle Prairie was brought up, that there were certain characteristics of the buildings and the site and everything that they had to comply with, that but that was imposed as part of the zoning and part of that master plan for the MU district. So looking at this area, the zoned R1, those kinds of standards weren't really imposed through the zoning in those cases. So when we're talking about the character development, sometimes that is really what we're looking at, is looking to something in the comprehensive plan or something in the rezoning itself or the underlying zoning that requires or has been discussed as the future character of a particular area.
Thank you, yes. Yeah, just to add on to that, you know, the commission is well aware of a lot of site plans that come through this body and the city council, that we do look at those elements of building design, open space, landscaping, but that is tied to that master plan and how that developer and property owner wants to lay that out. So yeah, Pinnacle Prairie along Green Hill Road is a good example of those types of uses and what goes through in the plan and development of those areas. So basically moving along with this site again with the comprehensive plan, it's identified as low density residential. The proposed plat meets those guidelines. It meets the R1 zoning guidelines. And this property, as well as any property in town, you know, they have that right to add garages and add building additions or plant vegetation, trees, build structures, you know, within that building envelope, that it could max out the size of those buildings, that could create less space in between the structures, but that's perfectly legitimate, you know, as well, as long as they meet those setback requirements for that district. How staff evaluates these cases is, you know, we look at, does it satisfy the R1 standards? Does it meet the subdivision requirements in the comprehensive plan? And this is laid out as it does. So the commission can disagree with our recommendations, but they must state the reasons for recommending denial on this case or any case that's brought before the commission at the time. So just want to follow up that a notification, last couple of meetings we did mail out. Basically, I sent out notifications up to 400, 700 feet to the east half of the entire subdivision. In that, of course, want to make sure that they know about it. It does exceed our minimum requirements at 200, but that was expanded to include those other property owners. So moving along, we would want to recommend the Community Development Department recommends approval of the Cherrywood Acres minor plat with the following recommendations, making sure that it conforms to the staff recommendations and the technical requirements, utility needs, the service connection. And again, that includes that water main across the north side of the property to a hydrant east of the existing driveway. Existing home should connect into water main as well as the proposed house. And then any comments and direction from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you, David. This item has had a lot of interest and in talking with staff, there may be there's been a question maybe raised if there's been any communication with outside of the public forum here with any of the commission members, and if wanted to offer the opportunity if any commissioners have been approached along the way, that they would like to or need to disclose, it would be the time to do that.
I did have a conversation with Mr. Runyon. I missed last week's meeting, and all we discussed was the fact that what he wanted to do for his plan on his house on his lot, and that was it.
Great, thank you, Mr. Winger. Anybody else? Okay, we'll keep moving along here. At this point, we will give the applicant an opportunity to address the commission with any updates or just a review where we're at.
Hi there, Tony Runyon, 4114 High Street. This has been quite the process. You can see there's a lot of pushback. I'm trying to build a home for my family. I meet all the ordinances and codes, and I'm going along with all the technical, the hydrant, which I had some issues with, but I'm good with it now. So that's all I want to do, build a house for my family. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Then I would open it up for public comment. And anybody who would like to address the commission on this item, I invite you to come forward to the microphone and state your name and address.
I'm Chad Schoeneman, 4307 Cherrywood. Is it Mr. Sturch? Is that your name right here, sir? Okay. I was glad to see him touch on the statement of character, because that was one of the things I was going to talk about tonight. When the SIGWERS were putting together their PowerPoint, I tried to give them some help with that and give them some information for things that happened to me. And I was actually the one that was here, that was present for the Prairie Parkway when they were, I think it was emergent architecture, and they were getting drilled about how the siding had to look, how the concrete had to look. And it jumped out at me really that regardless of when the character is evaluated, whether it's at the zoning or at a minor plat, I think it still applies. I think it still has credibility to the choice of whether it's a fit to plat or a fit to be rejected. And the reason I say that, I guess my first question is why is that? Why would that subdivision be given, such scrutiny to meet these different type of character criteria, but yet Cherrywood Acres is not given that same scrutiny? And in that section 20-31, the submission required for a minor plat, obviously there's a statement. I'm probably saying a lot of stuff here that most of you already are familiar with, but I wasn't. I had to go read this stuff. And it says, the plats shall be accompanied by a signed statement from the property owner addressed to the Planning and Zoning Commission stating that the proposed intent and uses of the proposed minor plat. And from what I could see in last week's minutes, it looks like that is in there. It looks like there's a document owner's statement of restrictions. Mr. and Mrs. Runyon filled it out. But what I didn't see in there was a statement of character. And this statement of character, as it's written in this section 20-124, the City Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council may require that certain minimum regulations regarding type and character of subdivision development be incorporated in the owner's statement of deed or dedication. And then it goes on to talk about what things can or can't be in there. Mr. Sturch just talked about those too. Another question I would have is the commission willing to consider adding a statement of character to this document? I guess I would like to hear firsthand from the Runyons, how do they plan to make this fit in the Cherrywood community? How do they plan to make this match what's already there? I would like to see that harmony maintained. And then the other thing that kind of jumped out at me was a comment from the minutes that the original restrictions in the abstract was referred to as a private covenant between the neighbors. So I guess I could use some clarity on how a document, even though it expired in, I think, 1985, it's on a self-resetting cycle of every 10 years. So it's still active. I mean, that document and those covenant, those restrictions in that are still active. So even if they're expired and even if they're legally not binding because they're ambiguous, they're still in there. I mean, it's still out there as a criteria that, hey, this was kind of, we saw this coming. We don't really want this. We want the character to be maintained. So I guess this question would be then for Mr. Sturch. Would you consider requesting that the commission or the council require a statement of character to be added to Lot 11? If not, why? And so with that, some of the last comments that I had added in there, I can see why Tony and his wife want to do this. I mean, I totally get it. I looked at the house, I looked at the sizes of the lots, I looked at everything that was out there. I totally get it. But to me, it just doesn't fit the neighborhood. It just doesn't fit. And I guess what I would like to hear from Tony and his family is, you indicated on social media that you and your family really like, that you love Cherrywood Acres. That's the neighborhood you want to be in, that's the neighborhood you want to stay. I guess I would like to hear, what are those things that you love about Cherrywood Acres? You know, is it the spaces? Is it the yards? Is it the friendly environment? Is it the annual picnic? I ask because these are, what you're doing here kind of goes against all that. So I would like to hear what you love about Cherrywood Acres. And I make that statement because, you know, putting a home less than 20 feet away from another home, taking away over 1/4 of a neighbor's field of vision that they've been, you know, that's a quality of life for them. And then basically putting a home right in the middle of a lot with basically no yard, that doesn't align with the community. And so some of the things that I think could be in the statement of character would be such things as the yard space. You know, the average lots in there are over a half acre, 5.3, 5.4. The average runs about 5.3. So maybe it could be stated that, you know, no lot's going to be smaller than a half acre. Another thing that could be in there is distance to other home, proximity spacing. You know, that's not part of the lot lines. That's not part of the setbacks. That's where you're jockeying stuff within those requirements. So maybe that could be something like home spacing will be no less than 20. You know, the average right now is 30. And then, yeah, lastly, that was just the ratio of home space to land space. So those are just, I guess, some of the things that I'd like to hear more discussion about.
Thank you, Mr. Shulman. Maybe before we have the next person who'd like to speak, with the staff maybe just want to review the distinction between what's in the private deed of dedication versus what the city is in charge of enforcing. Because that always comes up because there are, what, yeah, his comments referenced.
Yeah, the deed of dedication does outline those, the developer's wishes of how they want to set up the subdivision. So they they put in house size, garage size. Some have landscaping requirements, but it's up to each individual subdivision that it's the developer's intent of how they want that laid out. So it's, again, it's, the city accepts anything. They can accept a lot size, building size. It's just up to the developer and how that works out with the plating of that subdivision.
And just to add to that, the city wouldn't be enforcing any private covenants. While they're often in a subdivider's agreement or a deed of dedication, it's really a private matter. A lot of these things aren't really related to city requirements. It's not something that's been considered as part of the public process. So they're really individual to that particular subdivision and wouldn't be enforceable by the city.
Right, so yeah, city doesn't enforce those things because they weren't created by the city, essentially.
Right, correct.
I invite anybody else who would like to address the commission on this item to please come forward and give your name and address.
Hi again, I'm Susie Sigworth, and we live at 1028 Cherrywood Drive. We are the neighbors that Chad was referring to that live next to the Runyons, and it is our line of sight that will be taken away. I took some pictures and I sent them to Mr. Sturch's email, but before I came, I saw that I don't think that they went through. It looked like it was still loading. So I can share those with you after the meeting if you'd like to see them. Gives you a good idea of what we're looking at now versus what is proposed. So, of course, I have personal, I think I shared with everyone last time how personal this is to me. I wish I could speak like Chad, and everything that he said definitely speaks from his head and what makes sense with numbers, and I'm speaking more from my heart. But it is heartbreaking to me that we don't have a homeowners association. Didn't even know I had a deed until this came about and pulled it out. Because in Cherrywood, you know, there was a chuckle about what do you like about Cherrywood? Do you like the yearly picnic? It's the coolest place to live. I feel like everybody in Cherrywood has your back. And so, super frustrating to me. Mark and I talked about putting a berm in because Union Road's getting busier and putting trees. We're like, maybe we shouldn't do a berm. Let's not do dirt. Let's just get some trees, which we were gonna do this spring. That's all kind of on hold now, because we don't know what's gonna happen. But we didn't do that because we knew that that would make more water run into the Runyon's yard. Did we talk to them about that? No, it's just being a good neighbor. And so that's kind of how I feel Cherrywood has worked. Like, you just don't do things that you know wouldn't be good for your neighbors. So I'm frustrated. I'd like to also know why they left Cherrywood. There have been multiple houses go up for sale in the last couple months that are bigger. Sell your house, move to one of those. I don't understand. I also have to respectfully disagree with Mr. Sturch about the splitting of lots. Okay, maybe we can't have a drive off of Union Road, but there is more space in my yard between my back door and Union Road than there is from Tony's house to Union Road. All along, there is plenty of room. We could ask to split our lot and build another house. Had a neighbor on down the way that's not here that said, you're going about this all wrong. Let's just go and add another house to our lot and make some money. That's not what I want Cherrywood to be. I don't want more money. I don't want a new house. I want Cherrywood to be the way that it's been for 22 years since I have lived there. The other thing that I wanted to touch upon, Chad touched upon, you talked about the zoning being different for Cherrywood than it was on Prairie Parkway. Feel the same way as Chad. Why should we not have the same criteria? Is it because we're an older neighborhood that we don't get the protections? That's frustrating to me. Also, as far as adding more, splitting more lots, there's a house right across from the Runyons with the exact same layout, except they have a garage. It's an old garage, it's detached. What's keeping them from tearing that down and putting a house there? I see it happening because I'm pretty sure the person that owns that house is a developer. So I just don't understand why we would let one person do this to potentially ruin a whole neighborhood. Do I think I'm gonna be there forever? No. Is it impacting any of these people that are here as much as it's impacting me? No, but these are our neighbors and friends. And so they came in support of Mark and I. And that's the neighborhood that we live in. I can't thank them enough. I had someone from the neighborhood go around and take letters this week to everyone in the neighborhood because we wanted to make sure everyone knew that this was happening. I can tell you I did not have, we knocked on doors, 56 houses, did not have one single person say that we needed to relax, it wasn't a big deal. In fact, the majority were like, this is ridiculous. We can't even believe this is happening. So it's a neighborhood thing. I mean, you can see this, and we have a bunch of people that are on vacation that's dropped off letters for us to give to the city council. So I'm emotional about it. That's who I am. I love Cedar Falls. I love where I live. And if this passes, I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna feel. Mad, I guess. I don't know. So thank you for your time. Thanks for listening to me blab on, but I felt I needed to share.
Thank you, Susie.
Mark Sigworth, 1028 Cherrywood Drive. I think Chad did an excellent job, as did my wife, bringing some serious points to you folks. I would like Mr. Sturch to please pull up the slide, reference the water, and where it's supposed to run. Can you please pull it up, Mr. Sturch? If you look at this topographical map, where do you see the house that is currently there on your left-hand side? It goes down from 972 to 967. That's a 5-foot decrease. What you're looking at is the topical map, looking at that house and the yard, the open yards that we like, going to the northeast. If you are to put that house on there that Mr. Runyon would like to do, now all of a sudden where all that water is supposed to be going, the main middle section, that is going to be a structure. So that brings me to my next point, is if that's going to be a structure that will not allow the water to flow freely as it is right now and as it has since 1960, when you plop that house in there, how is that water supposed to get around? Because Mr. Sturch pulled up a map taken from a satellite. But I don't think Mr. Sturch physically went out there and looked at the lay of the land, because that doesn't show, because as you get closer and closer to Union Road, it doesn't just slope down. As you get closer and closer to Union Road, it slopes up, which means the water comes from our house to the northeast. If there's a house there, it has nowhere to go. There's no free flowing to the northeast. It flows northeast to that corner right now. But when you put a structure there, you're gonna have a fishbowl. House here, and the lay of the land coming off of Union Road, it will have nowhere to go. One, it's gonna puddle up in the back of Mr. Runyon yard, and he's gonna have damage to his basement, but it's also gonna affect us and our home. So you can't just look at a topographical map. I've said this in front of city personnel before. You can't just look at a map. Whether it's in your position or the city council, I'm gonna be very blunt. You need to get out of the office and go look at the property. Because if you looked at the property, you would see there's nowhere for this water to run. Nowhere. So please don't just rely on a map and a few numbers that plop across, because where those numbers are plopping across is where he wants to build a house. Second thing, my wife touched upon it, I'm gonna say it also. We have more room in the back of our yard to butt up against Union Road and put a second house. In fact, I talked to Mr. Sturch a couple weeks ago when I brought that up. But as my wife said, that's not the right thing to do. It's not a neighborly thing. As I told Mr. Sturch, I wouldn't do that to my neighbors, because that's not what you do, whether it's in Cherrywood or someplace else. You communicate. You don't go behind people's backs, you communicate, and it just wouldn't fit. You mentioned, Mr. Sturch, that we have state and city planning and master plans, comprehensive plan, character of development. Where in the character and development of this subdivision does a 32-foot house fit? I'm kind of sarcastic sometimes, but if you want a tiny house, go and watch HGTV. I don't want one in my backyard. It doesn't fit the character and development of the rest of the neighborhood, not even close. He's pretty quick, we're all pretty quick to pull up maps and all the square footage. You tell me where else in that subdivision or anywhere within 5 miles you have a house that has a width of 32 feet. It's not there. It's not gonna fit. Talked about Pinnacle and Pinnacle Prairie on Greenwood, or Green Hill Road, excuse me, the new subdivision. They have all these requirements that they had to take into account and make sure that they did. Well, we have an older subdivision. Again, as I stated a couple weeks ago, it's like a double standard. We have an older subdivision that has old deeds and old abstracts and an old character. We don't want it to look new. We want it to look as it is, as I and the rest of the neighbors do. You say it's up to the developer and that individual subdivision. Well, the initial developer is probably deceased by now. If the original plat and abstract was built in 1960, I have a feeling that person is probably gone. So we can't really talk to him. What you can do is you can talk and listen to the residents of Cherrywood, because as it states right there, and it was stated last week, it has to coincide with the character of the neighborhood. This was written in 1960. No, it wasn't written 2 years ago, and it might not be your current. But these houses were built, and they have character. Plain and simple, they have character. And you have people in those houses that have exceptional character and care about their neighborhood. So you can look as, yes, does it conform to the city code? Well, in 2019, yeah. But when these houses were built in 1960 and 70, it wouldn't have fit then. So it's kind of a double standard. You want to let Mr. Runyon go by the current standards, but everybody else has to be held to the old standards. It doesn't make sense, and it's not fair. And if I'm hurting Mr. Runyon's feelings, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't fit. We're a neighborhood, and we look out for each other. It is a distinctive and unique neighborhood. When you allow him to plop that house there, it takes it all away. There isn't another 2-story structure 32 feet wide on its own little lot. It doesn't exist in our neighborhood. So I ask you, you can listen to Mr. Sturch's recommendation, because he has to go by certain things by law. but then I ask you to look at what you think is right. Because you have that ability. That is why you're on this planning and zoning. To look at the figures, to look and say, yeah, this fits as far as that, but it really doesn't fit with everything else. You have that ability. That's what you're empowered to do. So I ask you, when you vote tonight, to do that job. Does it fit or doesn't it fit? Is this right or is it wrong? And before you hit the little button to put yay or nay, please make a good, conscious decision for myself, my wife, and the neighborhood that we truly enjoy living in. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else who would like to address the commission on this item? Please give us name and address.
My name is Del Carpenter. I reside at 1005 Cherrywood Drive, which is right across Cherrywood from Tony. And Tony's position is obviously not very popular here tonight, and maybe my support of Tony won't be either, but something needs to be said in behalf of Tony. And I want to say that. Tony's a great neighbor, lived in the neighborhood just a couple of years. We purport to be welcoming and encouraging and thankful for new blood in the neighborhood. And my hat's off to Tony for having the vision to see something that he can do with this property that will allow him and his family to stay in the Cherrywood community. I really would like to have him as a neighbor. I don't know what might happen if we turn him down and what recourse he may have. But I just want to come out on the side of Tony, and I hope I don't lose the support of the rest of the neighbors in the neighborhood for having done that. But Tony needs a voice, and I'm here to add to that voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Del. Anyone else here tonight who would like to address this item, please come forward.
Kirk Anderson, 919 Cherrywood. On High Street, where Tony lives, the water drains to the north. On the other side of the street, the water drains to the south. So right there, all the water is gonna come together. Now, we don't have curb and gutter in our neighborhood. We have field tile. So when Tony digs his basement, I'd like to see some sort of recommendation, guarantee that whatever tile, and we have no idea what's under there, that drains, that keeps our basements dry, that if those are disturbed, that they get replaced or fixed, or the city takes care of it somehow or the other. Thanks.
Thanks, Kirk. Anyone else who would like to comment on this item, please come forward.
My name is Carol Schnathorst, and I live at 1120 Cherrywood Drive. And I'm on the corner, and so my backyard is Union and 12th Street. And I feel like Tony building this does not fit our neighborhood. Also, the fact that I live on that corner, I feel that Tony would be making a big mistake for himself or for a future buyer to be living that close to the road. You would have to have a very tight home to not hear the traffic. And also, his garage is not going to be a buffer to that road, because his garage is going to be on the opposite side. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Carol. Anyone else who would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I would go back to the applicant. Is there any additional comments or anything you would like to address?
Yes, I have actually had a few people reach out to me in support of it, but they do not want to come out because of the backlash of what you've seen here. And as far as the tiny home, the home is about 1,900 square foot. so I wouldn't really call that, I would almost say that's one of the bigger houses in the neighborhood. And as far as what really the neighborly thing to do and building the berm out on Union Road, and we're not gonna do it because we're neighborly, we don't want water in my yard. They have downspouts with extensions running right into my backyard. I'm not gonna complain about it, but it just got brought up. So that just kind of upset me a little bit. But I'm aware that the characters of this neighborhood and people don't like change, but I think it's a good change for the neighborhood. It's gonna bring property values up, and I'm perfectly fine with living on Union Road. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Okay, at this point, then I will close the public comment on this item and bring it back to the commission for discussion and motion of some sort.
So my interpretation from what you're saying is that the character of the development clause really doesn't apply here in the staff's opinion.
The characters, excuse me, the characters tied in the, kind of the idea of the intent of the development. So if there are additional factors that you would like to add into that deed of dedication, those are things that the commission may add, like type of house, size of house, that kind of thing. But again, it's got to meet all those standards of the R1 standards, but it can't really interfere with the plat details as what's presented before you, if that answers your question.
I would just add that I think the commission is free to talk about the character of the development. I think our only guidance then is that you need to say really specifically why you would be voting to deny and what is it about the character that you believe rises to the level that should be denied. So then it's just up to the commission to individually express those views. And that just is following state code, making sure that everybody is aware of how the decision's made and that what factors you took into account to come to that conclusion, so that it's based on something that's in evidence during the hearing. So that everybody here, including everybody in the audience and the applicant itself, also is aware of why you've said that it doesn't meet the character or the subdivision code or any of those criteria that you have to consider. So we've given sort of our analysis about that, and like I said, it's your purview to discuss those items.
Can you clarify that the first public comment today talked about our opportunity to change covenants and that sort of thing? All those things are developed at the time of the development, and we don't have the power to change somebody's deed of dedication, if I'm not correct. Is that right?
Of the existing subdivision?
Yes.
No, you wouldn't have the power to change that. It's an agreement between the property owners that live in Cherrywood right now.
Yep.
So if it's a private covenant, they would need to consult their own attorneys if they wanted to change any of those covenants. I believe they've expired. So if they wanted to reinstitute something, but everybody would have to agree. All the property owners would have to agree usually to that sort of thing.
And they don't automatically renew. My understanding is that you have to renew them after the original term every 10 years. Is that correct?
I believe that's
I haven't seen the deed of dedication or the covenants for this, but my understanding in typical developments is that they do expire after 20 or 25.
21 years they expire, then you have to go in and renew them before they expire.
Correct.
So then you can probably apply again, this is a private issue, you can probably apply a 10-year horizon or, but that have to be agreed for upon by all the property owners.
And they are currently expired, to your knowledge?
To our knowledge,
Okay.
they're expired.
No, we're closed to the public comment, sorry.
I would just defer to the private property owners here that they would have, they should consult their own attorneys for that, for those matters.
Right, that'd be a private fight if there's a disagreement. So, yeah, this is a really difficult one for me because I'm looking at the numbers, if you will, and the way things are written. I mean, it essentially complies. I don't see any major flaws other than the thing that really concerns me about this is it is you've got large lots with large building areas, and when this new lot is created, it's a really small building area bordering on, almost not functional, depending on how you want to consider it. And that's where, I understand the heartburn of that. I don't know if that overrides their right to subdivide, to plat this and split this into two lots. I'm really struggling kind of with that whole give and take.
I also struggle with that for those same reasons as well. I'm also not comfortable with the sizing of the lots, especially considering that that is a huge area for growth. We've got other things that are coming in at that point, at that basic area. And I'm just afraid that if we ever widen Uden Road, that might make that lot size a little bit of a problem. So I would agree.
I drove out there and looked at the lots, didn't have any interaction with anyone, but in terms of line of sight and view and buildings on lots, I saw a lot of unattached double garages that were impeding someone's view too. So, it's private property and what they do with it. So and I think the water issue, you just have to deal with it. You have to know how to grade and deal with it and follow how well I know, because I subdivided and had to deal with it too. So you can deal with it.
The water thing was something that we didn't talk about much last time, but it seems to be one of the things that keep coming up. And anytime you would build anywhere, you have to maintain the conditions and drainage conditions that were present. And staff does a very thorough job of looking at those factors when we're talking about subdivision or something like that. And without formulating an opinion based on the site or anything, if we just look at the evidence that's presented to us, I don't see any issues with the water component. Where I was struggling last time, and still am to a point today, is the way the building of that width would fit into the development. And while I may not personally want it next door in my backyard, the more I think about it, I realize that there may not have been anything in the zoning or in the original deed of dedication while it was in force that would have prohibited that building from being built in 1960. So that's kind of up to an individual property owner's rights, as I understand, and the zoning, irrespective of the deed of dedication, the zoning for this area does not stipulate oversight architecturally. If it did, if somebody were remodeling their house and resiting it, they might have to come before this body and get picked apart for not having enough stone, or maybe needing to change the pitch of their roof while they're wanting to reshingle. And so there's a lot of freedom there that we really can't impose on. As far as the two-story and the shape of the building, whether it's the common shape of a home, is kind of irrelevant as I consider it. If you look at a new neighborhood, there might be 10 ranches built and the one odd two-story, and that's their right to do. So my position on this last time, I was struggling with the way that would fit into a neighborhood, but when I've considered all the angles, I just don't see how we could really get in the way of what the owner might want to do. I think Leanne's comment about the garage is a perfect example of the same types of conditions that could exist. The only other thing I wanted to add, I did drive by it as well, and not for the intent of looking at this. I just happen to be on Union Road because I am sometimes. And when I saw how dense the trees are in that area, I guess I kind of considered that maybe it wouldn't be the sore thumb effect that I was worried about when we were looking at what was submitted during the last meeting. So those are some of my thoughts.
I guess I struggle with the same kinds of issues that have been expressed, and it seems to me that it's really largely a private matter outside the purview of the city, the challenges that have been identified. So I would move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Comment?
I would say that I agree also with the personal property rights. I mean, everything fits with the city, and the fact that they came here and what I would call a character assassination of him is uncalled for. He wants to build a property on his own lot. And I just think the way that you have treated him is uncalled for, and I am in no way, prior to this, a friend of Tony Runyon's. I just think the way he's been treated is uncalled for.
I would make one other note as I struggle with this is that, 'cause I see this not totally as desirable. I see why people would not care for it. As I look through as the staff had mentioned, I think it's going to be very difficult to subdivide other properties within this subdivision just by the way they're laid out. So hopefully there's not those kind of issues going forward as this kind of an issue going forward also. So, any other comments before we go ahead and vote or discussion? We'll go ahead and vote then. We have 5 ayes and 2 nays. So that motion carries. So we'll go on to City Council. So those of you who are interested can address this matter further with the City Council. And do we know when that will be, David or Karen?
Yeah, likely it'll go to the July 15th council meeting. Notice will be sent out to the owners of that meeting probably a week before that. So this is a recommendation to the council.
Correct, yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody, for participating. We will now go on to our new business, and the first item of our new business is the Western Home Communities 9th edition final plat. And this item is one that I have to abstain on, so I will turn the chair over to Vice Chair Leeper for this item.
All right, we have a staff presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Lieber. A couple months ago, we sent the preliminary plat for the Western Home 9th edition through Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, and they're working on the construction plans and putting the necessary improvements for this next edition down at their South Main campus, which is located really at the southwest corner of Prairie View Road and Prairie Parkway. So I just kind of want to go over some plat details on that. This is, again, along Prairie View Road. It's an extension of Caraway Lane and a couple new streets. But basically, this is 18 additional lots for the continued development of the villas they have going on down there. So it's basically the 2-unit structures that are already in place there in north side of Prairie View Road. So they want to extend that down along the west half of this subdivision. So again, public streets are included in this, which is Caraway Lane, and it kind of extends to the west of Savory Lane and then back north to Lemongrass Drive. So there's 3 streets there. Track C is an existing driveway into the Diamond Events Center, and that's in place, which is kind of the extension of Caraway Lane off of Prairie View Road. So that section of roadway will be converted into a public street, meet the street specifications, a 31-foot wide back-to-back street, and again, as well as the other public streets in this area. Track C will be part of the public street system, which is the existing driveway. Stormwaters are collected through the storm sewer system and conveyed to the area-wide detention basin, which is down south in front of Menards. So everything is carried by pipe through that subdivision, down Prairie Parkway, and then Brandy Lynn Boulevard, and it kind of runs under Viking Road. So that area-wide detention basin was kind of set up for this area and surrounding properties. So just looking at kind of that large outlot there on the east half of the subdivision, which is Outlot A, that's intended for future development. It's really not a lot right now, so when Western Home has an idea for that outlot, it'll come back as a plat and site plan development like we did with the event center. We kind of did those elements, looking at building design and site design standards on that. So when Western Home is ready to do that, that'll come back through the commission. And some of the issues we'd be looking at during that would be kind of where the driveways line up on Prairie View Road. We want them to line up with the streets across the street, across Prairie View Road, which is Sweet Basil and Shooting Star, I believe. And then down at the bottom end, as development continues, depending on type of development, we'd want to see a Savory Lane. Could be a possible street connection if they intend to do additional villas. But they kind of want to hold that back for now until they have an idea. It could be another large building or something smaller, but that was the intent down at that south end is a possible street connection into that area. Because, you know, we look at multiple connections, nothing's going to go to the south because it basically goes into private commercial development. Prairie Parkway is kind of limited access again with that boulevard. So we want to make sure that those access points follow through in all directions as that outlot comes back for the Planning and Zoning Commission. So that's kind of reserved for those areas. Another issue with this is there is a utility, or not a utility, but a 15-foot wide pedestrian trail access easement that runs across the southern edge of that entire campus from Main Street to Prairie Parkway. So it's a 15-foot easement, pedestrian access easement within a utility easement, but it's on paper. We want to kind of clean that up, so to speak. That has been placed kind of as those phases were developed over the years. And the idea behind that is, you know, when we were planning Highway 58 and Viking Road interchange, that old section that ran across the Viking Road was going to be relocated, but, you know, to where? And at that time, the idea was to run a bike trail behind the Walmart and Blaine site, you know, from the existing trail along 58 over to Prairie Parkway, then tie it back over to the Target development. Well, that idea has changed, and now they put the trail in front of Blaine's and Walmart. It's a better idea just to, hey, you want to get the bikers where the development is at and don't run them behind the buildings, let's get them out front. So as part of the 58 development, the interchange, they actually built the trail as identified in that yellow line, which kind of comes down 58 and goes across Brandy Lynn Boulevard, then down Andrea, then crosses that Viking Road at a signal. It's a pedestrian signal there that they put in. It's not a traffic signal, but it just basically informs the motorists that there are bikes present and proceed with caution. And then it runs behind the Shields and Target area. And along those trails, there's some kind of connections into that development as well. So the easement's not needed. It was a request by the applicant to get rid of that entire stretch from Main to Prairie Parkway. And within that easement, I just kind of put that in there. It is pretty steep grades. It kind of falls from Blaine's and Western Home down into that development, and there's some transmission lines there. It'd be kind of hard to kind of squeeze a trail in that area without grading or moving some other features already there. So with that in mind, we'd want to move this final plat and recommend approval for that plat and easement vacation based on staff recommendations and any comments or directions from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
All right, thank you, David. Do we have anyone from the applicant that would like to speak? Seeing none. Any public comments? All right, I guess I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion then.
Looks pretty straightforward to me, and I would move to approve.
I'll second.
We have moved in second. We will vote. We have 6 ayes, so that item moves on to council.
Thank you, Mr. Leeper. Our next item is the terraces at West Glen preliminary plat. And David, you're going to introduce this one also. You're working hard tonight.
Thank you. Push the button. Yes, the last couple months, we've been looking at rezoning of a 42-acre parcel at the corner of Union and 12th Street for the new Aldea campus terraces at West Glen. Well, the next step in that process is the actual plat itself, preliminary plat for the development of that. So again, this is that land as well as the other properties to the south. So when we look at platting or starting with the preliminary plat, we want to look at the property owner and plat his entire holdings, which basically comes out to 240 acres. So that's what the preliminary plat details with this, is that entire development. New Aldea has purchased the north 42 acres, which is located in this area. And then the remaining portions of the plat is just Outlot B, labeled as Outlot B, just under 200 acres. And that's, again, intended for future development. Along with this, we'd have to look at a zoning and another preliminary plat for this area. So really the focus on this is kind of the north 42 acres for the West Glen development. So just kind of going over the plat details, this is really the west half of the plat. The inset in the corner kind of outlines everything in that area. As part of the plat, we have a tract along that's West 12th Street, identified there on the north side, not 27th, but we're at 12th and Union. There's a tract C that's going to be dedicated for public right-of-way. It's a 17-foot strip of land that's intended for a sidewalk and future improvements to 12th Street. There's a recreational trail along the east side of Union Road that's going to be put in here, designed and constructed here later, probably next year. So as part of the development, the original developmental agreement, the property owner will take part in the cost for that. The city will, it's kind of a partnership between the owner and the city on that. All streets are 31 foot wide, got public sidewalks, internal public sidewalks along all the streets. And there's a trail connection just along the north side of Lot 5, which is to the east of Wellington Drive. They want to put a trail just to kind of connect to develop into the ball fields to the east, so people can kind of wander their way over there and watch some games during the summer times. There is Outlot A, which is identified along the west side of Wellington Drive. That's intended for future development, and I'll kind of get into those details here in a couple slides. Tract A is a waterway, the existing waterway that runs through the property, and Tract B down the south end is detention basins. So within this half of the plat, we're looking at 5 lots. These are just larger lots intended for the West Glen campus of patio homes, 1 and 2 unit patio homes, along with some multifamily units on lot 1 and 3. So moving along to the east side, a couple more lots as Wellington Drive is extended to the east. Got a lot on the north and south side for development. And then Tract E again is for additional detention from the street. And then Tract A is part of the waterway and some detention that comes from from Robinson Dresser and the northeast side of that as it drains through the site. So just looking at the detention plan, it's kind of tied into some underground and overland waterways, existing waterways, but as you can see there on the along Union Road, there's an existing tile or pipe that runs under Union Road, and that's between the two streets there, midway, just south of Union 12th Street. But basically, that water's that comes from the development to the west side of Wild Horse, and that's going to be collected into a pipe underground and then transferred through that development into the waterway. And then there's another crossing, under road crossing down at the southwest corner, and that will be basically carried and graded over land and into a swale down along the south corner. As you can see, that arrow goes and then empties into that detention basin down at the south side, which is Tract B. The other red lines indicate storm sewers that collect the water from the streets and then are transferred to that detention basin, and it'll hold and release at a smaller rate. So it basically controls the runoff, collects it, and then releases at a slower rate. On the east side, there's a couple more detention basins that basically catch everything east of the waterway. And again, that's carried in storm sewers and pipes to those basins, and then they release in the waterway at a controlled rate. With that floodplain that runs through the middle of the site, the developer's engineer has submitted a letter of map amendment to FEMA for the review. The current flood boundary is identified in blue along there, which is outside of that tract, but they've kind of modeled it to redo that floodplain within that entire tract, so it'd be outside of Lot 1 and that Outlot B, which is Outlot A, that runs along Wellington Drive. So when that is completed and final plats are presented, those lots will kind of change for that development of those areas and those patio homes along that waterway feature. So this is the development concept that was presented at the zoning and land use amendment cycle when the commission and council looked at that. Again, it's just a row of patio homes and 1 and 2 family dwellings and multiple family dwellings. And so the plat itself, we look at, does it conform with the development plan and the RP zoning district? And basically it just still lays out that's your intent, and then continue to move forward with the development of the preliminary plat and then phasing the final plat. But the deed of dedication, again, is part of their master plan. This is their master plan, and those elements are going to be included in that, which is part of that developmental agreement we looked at. And that kind of talks about building use, density, ownership of real estate, and then property maintenance. It's the intent of New Aldea to maintain, own the property, and then the property, and they will do the mowing and whatnot on this area. So with that in mind, we just want to gather comments from the commission and public and continue the discussion here at the next meeting in July.
Thank you, David. So this is a information gathering and discussion item for tonight. So.
I'll be abstaining from this item.
Okay, and Mr. Wingert will be abstaining on this item. I would offer the applicant opportunity to come and address the commission with any comments. Any takers? Okay. I'll open it up to the public. Anybody in public who would like to come and make a comment, please state your name and address.
Thomas Paulson, 3218 West 12th Street, Cedar Falls. I own the approximately 25 acres right to the east of Robinson Dresser, and it will join this property. I just primarily have some questions, which is, what are they going to do with this piece of property in the meantime? Right now, it's sitting fallow, growing weeds. The waterway is getting out of control. I'm sure they have a lot of problems as far as runoff coming off a piece of property that's just bare dirt for all practical purposes, or corn stalks. And that's one question or issue that I'd like to see addressed. I'd certainly like to see that they do the waterway improvement earlier as opposed to later. At least the way I look at it, that's not slated for any place close to any part of the construction plan. That waterway has been a mess for years. The previous owner had proposed to improve it significantly, never got it done. The state wanted something done with it, and it just never transpired. I'd also like to know who actually owns the property. New Aldea or Glen Terrace LLC does not exist. It's not on the state's website. There is a West Glen Terrace Inc., but the LLC who filed all these documents doesn't exist, at least according to the Secretary of State's website. So how do we have an entity that doesn't exist actually propose a plan? It says in these documents that that the piece is under contract to be purchased from the existing owners, which it doesn't mention who the existing owner is. What happens if this entity that doesn't exist doesn't close on that contract and the plat is approved? So then does it fall back to the current owners that has the plat? I just see all kinds of issues as far as how this is being proposed, who actually owns it, and when they're going to deal with one of the major issues, which is the water control. And if you call that back up on the as far as what happens, there is one street that's going through there that in the documents it refers to it connecting with a piece in Lexington Heights. Well, if they really plan on that being something and they're going to put it in the plan, and the street's going to dead end there, maybe they ought to talk to the person that owns the piece of property, but between those two roads or between the two plats. That's all I have. It's really just questions and comments. Anybody want to address anything else that I've talked about or want further explanation? Fix the waterway first. It's a mess. Has been for a long time.
We'll ask that question.
No, that's a statement. Anybody have anything? I'm done.
Thanks, Tom. Anyone else would like to make a comment? Please come forward and state your name and address.
Good evening, Melissa Tierney, New Aldea Lifescapes, and I think I can answer some of this gentleman's questions, and unfortunately, I don't think he was able to attend our neighborhood meeting that we had prior to this gathering, but we have closed on the land. We own the land, and the LLC was filed, and I have the certificates for that, so perhaps the website's not up to date yet, but that was done fairly early in the process, filing for that LLC. And in terms of the waterway, I think we've had a lot of discussion in our prior planning that shows that we will be addressing the waterway feature for twofold reasons. We want it to be a very attractive feature for the residents of our community, and we also want it to work properly for drainage and water management. So certainly we do not want it to be unkempt. If things would progress, obviously, we would like to begin infrastructure still within a construction season, so late summer or early fall, which then would start to take care of the property on the west side of the waterway. And we'll do some grading on the east side of the waterway at the same time. And then we already have rented, and the 10.7 acres, I believe, has been planted for crop. So we do have plans for the management of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Anyone else who would like to? Yes.
John Biederman, civil engineer at the Fairground. And I just wanted to answer the question on the schedule for the waterway. We do have some permits to acquire which are in the works. So we understand that would be one of the first things to be desirable, but that may have to wait a little bit until we get that permitting in place. But it's all in the works, and it's just something we have to wait for. But other work can certainly take place ahead of that.
Thank you, John. Please come forward and state your name and address.
Carmen Mason, 3108 Waterbury Drive. And I think I'm speaking for all of our neighbors on Waterbury, and I've talked to Mr. Sturch, and he has been helpful. And it'd be nice if we could have, he said he would do this for us, a neighborhood meeting where we could be explained how the water is going to get drained during the building process and how it's supposed to end up. Because right now, as it is, it's a mess on Waterbury still, and I'm worried during construction how is that gonna look, and then just the end game, because just need more information. And a lot of our neighbors have not been able to make the last 2 meetings, so we'd like some more information as well about how the water's gonna drain and how it's gonna be better, because if it's not better, then it's a big problem for Waterbury. So.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to make a comment or share their thoughts on this item? Knowing that we're trying to gather information tonight in order to make an informed decision, probably, hopefully at the next meeting, it sounds like. So. No other takers? Any final comments from the applicant before we close it to the public?
One final comment. I'm not sure how much was all in your packets, but just on stormwater management, we've put together, what we feel is a good plan here. And I've got some numbers, basically from, we have to meet the city requirements for stormwater management. But from the existing condition, which has been row crop production for however many years, we feel ultimately there'll be about a 30% reduction in peak runoff rate just from what we're doing versus the way it has been with row crop production. So got more numbers that can back that up. We did put together an overall stormwater management report that city staff has reviewed. So if you have any questions, let me know and we can certainly get you some more information.
Thank you, John. I guess I maybe have a question directed towards the owner, applicant. As I look at the general plan and everything, looks like there's the proposal for a large building on the corner of Union and 12th. That looks like it would be 3 stories, and I know you've had discussions with people in the neighborhood, and I'm just wondering, has there been any pushback on that concept for that location? That would be the one thing that I would just kind of wonder about in the general planning. If there's any, somebody want to comment on that? I would be interested to hear.
Dan Cagle with Peters Construction. We did have a neighborhood meeting, several neighborhood meetings where we took comments, and that 3-story building on the corner of 12th and Union was addressed, and we saw that as a concern. We have done some preliminary modifications to that building. It's by no means fully designed yet, but we have made some modifications that sort of take the scale of that building on that corner and pull it back and lower the 3-story portion in that corner down to essentially a 2-story structure there. And so it's kind of now shaped, so we have sort of a 3-story section to the east on 12th Street and a 3-story section to the south on Union Road. So we've done our best to try to minimize the scale of that corner and its presence on that corner. And so trying to listen to the comments that we've received. And so to try to make it still a very attractive building, kind of the centerpiece of this development as on the corner of 12th and Union, and yet try to maintain the right balance of number of units that we need to maintain and meet the desires of the concerns of the city or the neighbors around.
So you've had some dialogue then
Yep.
with the neighbors.
Yep.
On that.
We tried to address that in those comments.
Has there been any follow-up since?
We have, the folks that attended the previous meeting, we've had very favorable comments from those folks. Not everyone obviously attended.
Right.
The recent meetings from the previous ones, but.
Okay.
Any other questions about that?
Thanks, Dan.
Okay.
I'll bring it to the commission for discussion, questions, answers.
Being a resident of Lexington Heights, I know the stormwater runoff issues at the south end of Lexington Heights. And I know that there's been a lot of work done over the years so that those lots were developed and the houses are built. And I'm happy to see the discussion about the stormwater runoff. The question I have, the concern I have is what happens if it doesn't work out the way that it's intended and there's a bigger issue for those Lexington Heights residents? What are their remedies? Are there any remedies if they end up with a bigger issue than they have right now with stormwater runoff?
Well, this is, I would say, 2 developments north of Lexington Heights, so, you know, they're doing their part to contain and release the rate, and then there's a gap from this development down to Lexington Heights. So that will have to do the same thing, so it's really going from a field runoff condition to more of a controlled rate. So those models will take a look at this one, the middle one, and then how it impacts the Lexington Heights subdivision.
And so it's designed to either maintain or improve the current situation.
It's maintain or improve, and then again, along with that potential development in between, they'll have some stormwater detention areas. There could be some opportunities to add additional stormwater just to the south side of Lexington for some capacity, because you know the road it really restricts the flow, but as it gets through the flow, it does spread out, you know, along the south side of those homes. So there could be some opportunities to add to the capacity on that south side as well. If that answers your question.
I'm concerned about the current homeowners having a situation that is worse than what they have right now.
We've talked a lot about the outflow, John. I'd like you to talk a little bit about the inflow, because there was some concern about backup to the neighbors from the north, right? Are we making it any better in any way for those conditions that exist?
Okay, so from the north, as we cross 12th, is that the question there? Okay, so there's roughly, I believe, 110 acres plus or minus that enters our property across 12th from the north. We are just letting that pass through. So it's not like we're taking any of that water and putting it into stormwater management. The structure under 12th, so it's a culvert, it's an arch pipe, but it's equivalent to like a 54-inch round pipe. It's fairly, it's nowhere close to size for a 100-year storm. So you get heavier rainfalls, that infrastructure is not going to handle it. It's going to back up on that side a touch. I don't know that it really gets any homes or anything, kind of sits in the ditch, whatever. Builds up high enough, it's coming over 12th, and then, you know, we're getting the full brunt of it. But we've actually, the FEMA study that's in place for that waterway through there, we looked at that. We got actually their data from them. They had a pretty low flow calculated at that far north end. It's lower than what reality is. So we've actually bumped that up at that end to what we feel reality is. And our waterway, you know, we're improving the waterway. It'll have easy capacity. We will not back up through 12th and make it worse on the other side. I mean, if it comes to us, we'll be passing it through without backing up. The other areas that we're taking water from the west, so across Union, there's 2 culverts that cross 36-inch stormwater management facilities of sorts in the Wild Horse Edition in 2 locations. Older, it doesn't appear they were really designed for the 100-year, the current stormwater management ordinance the city has. So the northerly of those crossings, as David mentioned, we're just passing through. So we're not required to manage that. Anything that comes at us, we're allowed to pass through. So that's what we're doing. The southerly of those, we are actually putting into our detention basins. So it just worked out numbers-wise. We actually take their water from that southerly and add it in with ours and release it. So ultimately, from the west, there'll be an improvement to downstream owners. And again, we're not backing anything up through Union onto their side. I mean, we're letting everything come to us and letting it pass through. Other on-site or off-site water that's coming at us is really in that easterly portion. So at the far easterly end of Robinson Dresser, there's a waterway that comes down. I think the gentleman had mentioned that it comes through his property, which is correct. Originates actually from the golf course, comes down through Robinson Dresser and into ours. That's a future phase, but what we have planned is to let that pass through. We'll reroute the waterway a touch, let it pass through, because it's really not our water, it's off-site water. I have had some contact with the school and Robinson Dresser. At some point, we may do something up into Robinson Dresser to slow down a little bit of their runoff, like from the baseball field in that area. Not that that's a part of this project, it'd be a separate project, separate owner, but something may happen there. And then the other place we're getting water is more to the westerly side of Robinson Dresser. So if you think of the whole parking lot for Robinson Dresser, all that runs off kind of along their westerly line and then crosses us. So our plan is to take that water, which currently is unchecked, no management, and we will actually put that into that future phase of detention that we have. It comes at us anyway. It's harder to pass through and it just makes sense to handle it. So that's kind of an overall improvement between a couple properties that we're able to do there.
So it's accurate to say that we're not making anything worse to the west or north? Or,
correct, right, yeah. There's no reason we should make anything worse. They're high enough up elevation-wise that we'd have to work really hard and it'd be very difficult to back up onto them. But we're taking what they have and allowing it to pass through. Just another piece of information, at the upper end of Lexington, there's roughly, it's 400 acres plus or minus of drainage that's coming at them. So we have 42, we have about 10% of what comes to them, just for kind of, so you have a rough idea of what that all is.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
Yeah, so John, the one, maybe just follow up, I mean, you're taking care of obviously all the water on this property, but there is sort of an excess from the west and north that's coming through that.
Yeah, so to the west.
You can't handle all of
right,
that.
Yeah, correct. And
So,
we're not required to manage what comes at us from off.
So what I don't want to maybe mislead people is you're not solving all the water. You can't possibly solve all the water problems. Correct. You're not making it worse, but you're not, because neighbors are concerned about water problems. Right. So, I mean, if there's excess water that's coming from the north and west, you can't handle all that. Right. You're just letting that go, right? And you're taking the portion.
Yeah, we are, like I mentioned, we're taking a little bit of that water to the west and probably improving that a touch under those real large events. Just as kind of, it just made sense for us to do in the way we had it laid out. But yeah, like I said, Wild Horse has detention basin, stormwater management of sorts. We don't feel it's quite up to current city code, but it was fine for the day it was developed. The area further up to, I believe it's Cherrywood, up to the northwest, there's nothing in there for stormwater management, so that just comes down at us. Same with golf course, maybe not necessarily planned, but there's a few little areas in there that appear to hold water. Is it a true detention basin? Probably not, but it kind of serves as that function to a small degree, but basically unchecked from the.
So, I mean, if somebody really wanted to take care of 100%, you almost have to go to the north and west and do a little bit of
yeah, like I said, that development really has nothing, so it would be managing it in that area. Yep.
So if there are problems to the north, and clearly there's been some expressed by the public, if those issues get addressed, they're off your site, but if they do get addressed in the future, they're coming through your site still probably, right?
Still coming through our site, yeah, and if something happens up there, I would guess it would be an improvement, which would just be less coming.
But your site can handle those improvements when they happen?
Yeah, because it should be improvements.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've got it calculated at, basically the worst case, and if there's improvements up there, it's all the better for everybody.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Yep. Quick question on there's the south track that's not platted yet. Is there a thought about how, does that, from a road point of view, does that all come through this in the future? Through this track?
Yes, that's what we want to look at when we're, setting up the rezoning and the platting for this is, if you take a look at that street extension, I think it's Peters Parkway that runs along parallel to the west side of that waterway, kind of dead ends at the south line of that. So The idea is to kind of curve that to the east and run through that adjoining property owner kind of diagonally and then connect into the rest of that area down south of the waterway. So we want to have connections through from this to the south into that development, and then of course to the east into existing developments and roadways.
My question is more about the future tract. Wait. The one that's to the south, right? That's all still coming through here?
You talking south of the waterway, that larger outlot, the 192 acres?
Yeah.
Yes, that will be connected to Union Road and 27th and tied into existing subdivisions. Is that your?
Yeah, yeah, that's my question.
Yep.
Thank you.
Other questions, discussion? Anybody want a final comment before we move this along?
We'll bring this back at the next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for more discussion.
Yep.
It's an introduction.
Okay. All right, well, we will look forward to seeing this at the next meeting. All right, we will move on then to our final item of regular business tonight, which is Perrault Subdivision preliminary plat. And David, you're going to introduce this once more.
So this is a preliminary plat down at the corner of Nordic and Commerce Drive. It's submitted by the property owner Perrault LLC. They're the ones who own the property. They built the Hilton Garden Inn at that site, which is has been through this body and Planning and Zoning Commission, and then more recently they did the conference center expansion there to the east side. So again, that's under construction right now. And then the second hotel was the Town Place Suites. I think it came through last fall at the time, so that is intended here for another future development. So the idea for this parcel, this 12-acre parcel, is to split this lot into 4 separate lots. Again, lot 1 would be for the Hilton Garden Inn and their parking and conference center. Lot 2 is for the Town Place Suites. Lot 3 and Lot 4 is just set aside for future commercial development. Probably something that could, work well with a hotel, restaurant, strip malls, that kind of thing. But the idea is commercial use in this area. It's just really essentially a replat of Lot 3 of Lockard Pines Edition that was created 10, 15 years ago, which was part of that corner down by Ridgeway and 58. Also included in that was the Super 8, the Financial Credit Services, Quick Star, and then Comfort Inn and Suites are on the other side. So this is kind of that lot there at the northwest corner of that. So there's really no public improvements involved with this. We have a couple driveways that run through the property. They're existing driveways that access from Nordic Drive and Commerce Drive on the south side. And those are in place now that those existing and future property owners will use for ingress and egress. Tract B is a stormwater detention area for Lot 1 and Lot 4, and those are kind of area-wide set up for this entire lot. And then Tract A is another stormwater feature for the other Lot 1 and Lot 2, Lot 3. Those are kind of going to grade into those areas. Those actually basins were kind of reviewed and approved already for the existing hotels, and those were kind of constructed to accommodate the entire development as that moves along. So pretty fairly straight preliminary plat. We'd just like to move this forward for City Council based on comments and recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and make sure they meet all our technical requirements.
Great, thank you, David. Is anybody representing the applicant like to make a comment? No. Any public comment? Getting kind of thin. I guess not. Bring it back to the commission.
Again, seems pretty straightforward.
I agree. I would move to move it forward.
I have a motion to approve. Is there a second? It's been seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. And we have all eyes on that, so that passes, and we'll move on to city council. Do we know when?
That'll go on the 15th of July.
15th of July, all right. That concludes our regular business for the evening. Is there any commission updates? Nothing? Boy, you usually have something good for us, Karen.
Sorry about that.
All right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Your second? Second. All in favor signify with aye.
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 Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.